Ian Anderson, the unmistakable frontman of Jethro Tull, known for his flute-wielding stage presence and progressive rock poetry, isn't someone who usually throws jabs without thought. But when he recently shared his honest take on Rolling Stones icon Mick Jagger's vocal abilities, the rock world leaned in. His words? He didn't set the bar very high. Now, it wasn't just a stray comment. It wasn't a personal attack either, but it opened a window into how one legendary artist sees another, through years of performance, experience, and musical evolution. Why did Ian Anderson say this? What did he really mean? To understand that, we need to rewind the clock. Back to the 1960s, the time when both the Rolling Stones and Jethro Tull were carving out their identities. While the Stones were exploding with blues-driven rebellious energy, Jethro Tull was diving into folk, jazz, and literary rock experiments that often soared above the mainstream. And yet both bands shared the same stages, the same radio waves, and often the same fan base. So when Ian Anderson, a man known for dissecting ideas with surgical precision, gave his thoughts on Jagger's vocals, it wasn't petty rivalry. It was a deeper observation, one based on performance, musical standards, and the evolving expectations of what a rock singer should be. The Anderson philosophy. To understand Ian Anderson's critique, you first have to understand his own artistic standards. Anderson has always approached music intellectually. For him, being a frontman wasn't just about screaming into a mic or shaking your hips. It was about delivering meaning, about phrasing, about discipline. So when he described Mick Jagger's singing as didn't set the bar very high, he followed it up with a clarification. He respects Jagger for being a great showman. But vocally, that's where Anderson believes the expectation should have been higher. And not just for Jagger, but for all singers who came in his wake. According to Anderson, Jagger's singing wasn't technically bad. It was simply limited, often relying more on energy than pitch or technique. In Anderson's view, many of the early rock stars weren't held to the same vocal standards as jazz or classical musicians. And while that helped rock and roll stay raw and emotional, it also meant that some singers, like Jagger, got by more on style than on vocal mastery. Anderson's point wasn't to slam Jagger, but to point out how expectations were shaped around figures like him. Jagger didn't need to be an incredible singer to become iconic. He needed swagger. He needed attitude. And that he had in spades. Rock versus art rock, the great divide. While the Rolling Stones were lighting fires in arenas with songs like Jumpin' Jack Flash and Brown Sugar, Ian Anderson was busy writing concept albums like Thick as a Brick. For Anderson, songwriting was about architecture. It wasn't just about 3 chords and a hook. It was a journey. This is where the core difference between Jethro Tull and the Stones lies. And it also explains Anderson's critique. To Anderson, rock music had a responsibility to evolve, to become more than just entertainment. He wanted it to challenge minds. And while Mick Jagger was certainly a provocateur, his songs were often designed to get people dancing, not thinking. In an era where being a frontman could mean anything, Jagger leaned into the physical. He strutted, sweated, shouted, and swirled his hips like a peacock. Meanwhile, Anderson was often standing on one leg, playing the flute mid-verse, and reciting lines that could have belonged in Shakespeare. These weren't just 2 different styles. They were 2 different philosophies of music. And so, when Anderson talks about Jagger's singing, he's talking about a bigger idea, that many early rock singers weren't pushed to grow vocally because their audiences didn't demand it. And perhaps, if Jagger had been held to a higher standard, maybe others would have followed suit. The power of performance. Still, Anderson didn't dismiss Jagger's power. Quite the opposite. He admitted Jagger was one of the best frontmen in history. That says a lot coming from a man who himself is known for eccentric performances. Anderson acknowledged that Jagger's charisma was unmatched. He could walk into a stadium and command it like a king, his presence, his timing, his awareness of audience. Those things made him a legend. So, what's the issue? The issue, according to Anderson, is that while the presence was world-class, the voice was secondary. Jagger often sang just enough to get the point across. Never more, never less. And to many fans, that was enough. But not to Ian Anderson. Because for him, the voice is a tool, a paintbrush. And you're supposed to use the whole range, not just scratch the surface. He believed singers should explore dynamics, enunciation, tone, and control. Anderson's own vocals, while not traditionally pretty, were layered with intention. You could hear the phrasing, the deliberate choices. It was about more than sound. It was about storytelling. And in that comparison, Anderson saw Jagger as someone who had a different mission, one that leaned more on charisma than craft. The uncomfortable truth about early rock singing. Ian Anderson's comments opened up an uncomfortable truth, that many early rock singers weren't judged by the same standards as vocalists in other genres. In blues, jazz, and classical, your vocal ability had to be trained. You had to hit notes, hold tones, and understand phrasing. But in rock, you could get away with passion over precision. Jagger wasn't alone. Many of his peers, from Jim Morrison to Lou Reed, weren't trained vocalists. They were stylists. They created a feel. That was enough. But Anderson wasn't satisfied with enough. He believed rock deserved better. That as the genre matured, so should the expectations. And in many ways, he lived that belief, pushing the boundaries with progressive arrangements and poetic lyrics that required more than just shouting into the mic. So his comments weren't about Jagger personally. They were about the legacy that Jagger unintentionally left behind, that you didn't have to be a great singer to be a great rock star. And to Anderson, that's a missed opportunity. When respect and critique coexist, some fans may have misread Anderson's comment as disrespect. But to truly understand it, you have to listen closely. He never said Mick Jagger was bad. He said Mick Jagger lowered the bar vocally, but then quickly added that he loved Jagger as a frontman, that he admired his energy, his confidence, and his showmanship. It's possible, and actually quite mature, to respect someone while still holding them to a higher standard. That's what Anderson was doing. It's like watching a great athlete who never learned to pass properly. You still admire them, you still celebrate their highlights, but you can still wish they had developed other parts of their game, and that's how Anderson sees Jagger, a titan of stage presence, a symbol of rock's wild energy, but vocally, a missed opportunity to evolve the art form. The legacy that followed. Anderson's critique isn't just about the past, it's about what came after Jagger. Because when you become the gold standard, as Jagger did in the 60s and 70s, you influence generations, and many of those who followed adopted his style without question. The idea that a singer just needed swagger to succeed? That started with Jagger, and to some extent, that shadow still looms over modern rock. Anderson's frustration is that more singers didn't try to build on top of what Jagger started. They didn't say, let me keep the attitude, but also develop my instrument. Instead, many settled. And that, Anderson suggests, is the real loss. Not that Jagger wasn't great, but that he became the ceiling, not the floor, for future artists. How Anderson would have done it differently. Ian Anderson isn't shy about sharing what he values in a vocalist. He praises clarity. He respects singers who pronounce their words. He appreciates melodic control, even in the chaos of rock. When asked about his own approach, Anderson said he always tried to give the listener a full picture, not just emotionally, but intellectually. That means using your voice not only to hit notes, but to carry meaning. He believes singers should make their lyrics understandable, not buried, and that each song should be performed with deliberate expression. He may not have had the smoothest voice in rock, but he worked at it, and that's his main point. He put in the effort, and maybe, just maybe, he wishes that Mick Jagger and the singers who followed him had done the same.